Today we are going to review another vampire book. Of course, we are continuing with my reviews for the books in Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, and this week's review is going to be Vittorio the Vampire. This is the second book in the New Tales of the Vampires sub-series of the Vampire Chronicles. But if you were to mix it in with the rest of the series, publication-wise and timeline-wise, this is actually book number 9 in the Vampire Chronicles as a whole. As you can imagine from the title of the book, it is Vittorio himself talking about the events that ultimately led up to him becoming a vampire. Vittorio was a young man in his teens during Renaissance Italy. His family was a noble family. They were very well off, and they ruled peacefully over a city in the countryside outside of Florence. And there were a bunch of other villages and towns around there as well. And slowly, those other villages and towns became abandoned, and they had no idea why. Until one night, when their entire town is assaulted by a group of vampires, and everyone dies except for Vittorio himself. Because of one lady vampire that happens to be infatuated with him somehow, even though she only just met him, because apparently that's how love works. The rest of the book, from then on out, is basically Vittorio just trying to get his revenge on the deaths of his family. And as you might expect, that doesn't really work out the way he hoped it would, for a multitude of reasons. I was hoping, really, really hoping, that in rereading this book, I would enjoy it about as much as I did before. Oh, hell no, I definitely did not. There are a few issues with this book. Namely, the fact that apparently, you could argue that, it's difference in the time period, people were considered adults at a much younger age, yada yada yada. Some people would argue that, but I don't think that's an excuse for sexual assault. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. The female vampire I mentioned, Ursula, yeah, she sexually assaults Vittorio, and I don't know if it's whether or not he's still a teenager or something. There isn't very many years difference between them. She was turned not that long before she met Vittorio, maybe a couple years at the most. But I don't know if it's because they weren't fully developed as people, physically and mentally, that, sexual assault can be misconstrued as love, and he thinks he loves her, but then she deceives him and turns him into a vampire even though he said not to do it. There's a whole lot in this book that some of it I can overlook because it's vampires just doing vampire-y stuff for the most part, but that part I wasn't really very fond of. There are instances that have strong religious, Christian, or spiritual connotations to them. I don't mind those too much in this book because, again, this is Renaissance Italy. Vittorio, like a lot of Italian people in that time frame, were highly religious, very Catholic. It's not too surprising that he thought he saw certain things or experienced certain things, especially during the time between when he was attacked and all that jazz. There's instances where you can probably chalk it up to him not feeling well and yada yada yada. Regardless of how you approach it or how you interpret it as, I felt it was appropriate for Vittorio as a character to experience. I suppose you could say it's not considered as problematic in general because it's an adult book. We already have young adult books that do a similar kind of thing on a slightly lesser scale, so I don't like it either way you look at it, personally. I don't like stories that romanticize abuse in any way. And while a lot of the book I did like, and Anne Rice's writing style still clicks with me, and there's a reason why I gave this a 2-star rating instead of just a 1-star rating, because in general, it's still a decent book, but there was just a few too many things in the book that were problematic to me, stuff that I didn't like. And now that I've reread it, I'm like, I liked this book as a teenager. What the actual fuck was I thinking? On the upside, I do respect the book for having grabbed my attention and brought me over to for starting my love of vampire fiction in general. If it wasn't for me finding this book in my high school library and reading it, I probably wouldn't have been exposed to Anne Rice. I probably would have never really fallen into this beautiful abyss of vampire fiction that I love so much. It's a very short book as well. Just like Pandora, the font size is a bit bigger than normal for a mass market paperback, so it's at 289 pages in mass market form, so very short book, shorter than Pandora. Great for a quick day or two of a read. I think it only took me 4 or 5 days to read, pretty much the same amount of time as it took for me to read Pandora, so definitely good if you want a quick read. Another thing I'll mention too is that its connection to the Vampire Chronicles as a whole is very limited. Vittorio mentions in the beginning of the book he knows about the existence of a lot of other vampires in the rest of the series, but he keeps away from them. He keeps himself in solitude. He'd rather not interact with them. I do feel that if you are one of those people who wants to get a feel for what you might be into with the Vampire Chronicles, but you don't want to invest in characters that... If you're one of those people that feels if you read a book later on in a series and you feel like you're missing something about certain characters if you don't read earlier books and you don't like that, I think Vittorio the Vampire might actually be a very good book for you, because quite literally, he only exists in this book. So far as I've read, he doesn't have a mention anywhere else. He doesn't appear anywhere else. None of the characters from the rest of the series appear in the book. Again, he only mentions them, and not usually by name, very briefly. So if you want to get a feeling for whether or not you might like these books, you might want to give Vittorio the Vampire a shot. Again, just keep in mind, there is some sexual assault in here. I know there are people who are not fond of that, just like I wasn't fond of it, so something to keep in mind. But yeah, that was my review for Vittorio the Vampire, the first Anne Rice vampire book I ever read. Now I want to know what you guys think of the book. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Do you agree or disagree with what I've said? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please be respectful as you do so. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye!